Hi, this is Majnu, and welcome to this new series of chess videos about chess miniatures. Chess miniatures are chess games that were won in less than, well, let's say 20 moves. So short games with lots of dynamics and attacks, and that's always very exciting to replay. So I've chosen a few Grandmaster games that were won within the 20 moves. And this first one was played in 1970 between the Grandmaster Tigran Petrosian with white against a Peruvian player called Rodriguez Vargas. It was played during the Chess Olympiad between the teams of the Soviet Union and Peru. The rating of Petrosian at that time was 26-45. And his opponent was rated 24-25, so there is quite a big difference of more than 200 points. Well, let's have a look at the game. The first move is d4 by Petrosian, and knight f6, c4, e6, knight to f3, d5. So we have this queen's gambit, knight to c3, c6, e3, knight b to d7. These are moves that have been played, well, perhaps millions of times. Queen to c2, bishop to d6. Now, you know perhaps that nowadays the move g4 is very popular. I like to play it myself also, to sacrifice this g-pawn, and the idea is to play g4, and after knight takes g4, rook to g1, attacking the knight, and if the knight moves back, then the rook can take on g7. That's the main idea, and it leads to very exciting positions. But in this game, Petrosian chose a more positional approach. He played the move b3, a very popular idea as well, to place the bishop on b2 to control the center from there. Now, for black, the main plan is to prepare the advance of the e-pawn from e6 to e5 in order to be able to develop his light squared bishop, because that's, let's say, the problem in this type of variations, this light squared bishop that is locked in by its own pawns. Mostly black plays here castling kingside, and after castling kingside the rook goes from f8 to e8, and then the e-pawn is supported by the rook. But in this game, black played e5 immediately. Now, it's not wrong to play e5, but it's very uncommon. White replied c takes d5. Black now didn't take on d5, but he answered e takes d4, attacking the white knight. Now there are two options now for white to take on d4 or to take on c6. Both are playable, and white took on d4. Now here black chose to castle kingside and actually sacrifice a pawn that way, because the pawn on c6 is going to fall. Now, if he would have taken this pawn on d5, then follows knight takes d5, c takes d5, and after bishop to b2, white has a very beautiful position. Isolated pawn for black. This bishop is going to d3, where it targets this the h7 pawn. So white is very comfortable here. Now, in the game, black didn't take on d5. He castled kingside. Now white took on c6, and black played knight to e5. So he didn't want to retake here immediately. It would lead to nothing actually. So knight to e5. The idea of knight to e5 is to invite white to take on b7, and in that case it would be actually quite good, because after c takes b7, bishop takes b7. Now black has also very active pieces. This problem bishop is now placed on a beautiful open diagonal, and the c file is open, so rook to c8 is possible later. So here we can say that black has some compensation. Perhaps not enough for 2 pawns in the future, but at least he has active play. Now in the game, white didn't take on b7. He simply continued his development, so playing simple, healthy chess. Bishop to e2. Now black took on b6. Bishop to b2 now. Well, this is actually quite optically also a very strange position with these four knights on this diagonal. But oh, I'm sorry, let's go back here. Fact is that this bishop on b2 is very well placed now, and is going to be one of the main weapons later in the attack. Queen to a5 now played by black. Now white plays h3, controls the g4 square, so preventing one of the knights going to g4 and attacking f2. The idea of this is perhaps the next move, that after knight to g6, white castles queenside. So that's white's idea, to castle queenside, and when two players castle on opposite sides, it always leads to tension, because both can have the possibilities of attacking the opponent's king. Here perhaps the best option for black would be to try to use the b file, playing for example bishop to d7 and then rook to b8, something like that. I don't know. The fact is that in the game black played bishop to b7, and this is not correct. Placing this bishop on b7 while still his pawn is on c6, white's attack now starts getting more speed. The next move is a beautiful one, knight to e6. The bishop on d6 is undefended. So after f takes e6, rook takes d6, white already has improved his position. Black's pawn structure has been damaged. The pawn on e6 is undefended. This bishop can go later to c4, where it is directed towards this black king, and this bishop on b2 is also one of the weapons that can be used later. Let's have a look at how this continued. Black tried to save this pawn by playing e5. Then the principle of involving all the pieces into the attack was now used by Petrosian. He played rook h to d1, so controlling the d file with both rooks. Black replied knight to d5, bringing some more pieces towards the center and towards the queen side. But now white has a very beautiful move, bishop to c4, pinning this knight on d5. Well, of course this has an immediate threat of e4 winning this knight, so black must play king to h8. That's what happened in the game. And here we are already at move 18. So in a few more moves the game ended. The next move of white is a beautiful sacrifice. He plays rook takes g6. After h takes g6, queen takes g6, black resigned. Now let's have a look why. Why did black resign here? He is the exchange up, we can say, but that's not important in this position. The fact is that black's king is in danger. He's missing the h pawn and the f pawn for the defense. The black queen is far away from the defense of the king, and also this bishop is not playing any role. Now there are different possible attacking plans here for white. For example, this knight could go to e4, then to g5, threatening mate on h7, or after knight to e4 this bishop could take on e5, threatening queen takes g7, checkmate. So there are several attacking patterns here, and I think that black must have calculated a few variations and decided that this actually was impossible to hold, so he resigned. But let's have a look at a few of those variations. Let's have a look at what, for example, happens after rook takes f2. Rook takes f2. Then we have queen h5 check. The king must go to g8, there is no other option, and then queen takes e5 is very strong. We are threatening to move this knight away. For example, knight takes here, and then at the same time threatening mate on g7. Let's say that black defends by moving the rook to f7 to defend this g7 pawn. Well, then we simply advance the e-pawn. And this knight is pinned, well, let's say pinned twice. Pinned in this direction, but also pinned in this direction. So the knight cannot move away, because then the queen falls. If black defends with rook to d8, we simply take on d5. C takes d5. Knight takes d5. And here, well, the threat is to, for example, to give a check on e7. And actually the whole position collapses of black. There is no possible defense. And if black wants to trade some pieces, well, actually what results after this whole trade is that white is always winning this rook. So the endgame is totally won for white. Now let's have a look at another variation in the from this position where black resigned. What if queen to c7? So if black tries to defend this g7 square, well, then also we have this check on h5, and after king to g8, e4. So the knight goes lost now. After rook to d8 to defend, the knight would take. And now this is an important moment, because after c takes d5, it looks as if, well, this queen is very well placed because it's pinning these two pieces. So after knight takes d5, bishop takes d5 looks like a possible solution, because the bishop cannot retake here. But the thing is that we simply ignore that. White can play here bishop takes e5, attacking the queen. If the queen wants to stay there pinning this bishop, it must play the queen to a place on the c file, so queen to c6, for example. But in that case, queen to g5 is already very annoying because of this threat of checkmate on g7. If black tries to defend, for example, by rook to d7, then we can take on d5, because the rook on d7 is overloaded now. It cannot take on d5 because of the checkmate on g7. So these are a few of the possible variations in this position, in this ending position with the queen on g6. Well, I hope you enjoyed this game, and I'll see you next time on YouTube. Goodbye.